Claypool. Okay, no, actually, let's get back on Dallas for a second because I just really want to talk about Dallas. Now that we're talking about Dallas. Dallas had.
We're going to talk about Dallas in a second because we're going to talk about.
No. This is better because it's Amari Cooper. We'll come back to Chase later. We have Amari Cooper on the team. He's making, I don't know, $100 million or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
Dude's a stud. He's not a stud. He's fine. He's a good wide receiver. Very good wide receiver. Just not a superstar. And then we have Ezekiel Elliot, superstar running back. And then we have Dak Prescott. And the Dallas Cowboys went out and put a pile of money into their running back, Ezekiel Elliott, so that they could not have Amari Cooper and Dak Prescott. They had to jettison one of them. They obviously chose not to jettison Zeke and instead jettisoned Amari Cooper. And now it turns out that Ezekiel Elliott is significantly worse than their backup running back. And you know who is not significantly better than Amari Cooper? Noah Brown is not significantly better than Amari Cooper. So, like, I like my stance on this.
Twitter told me that Jalen Tolbert was probably going to be about as good as Amari Cooper.
Oh my God, the Jalen Tolbert stuff was insane. It was like Michael Gallup's rookie year. Like people were like, "Oh, Michael Gallup, wide open depth chart, dude's going to be an awesome." And then he
but Michael Gallup at least like actually had a good second year, and he like will have a long NFL career. Jalen Tolbert will probably be in the CFL in a year.
I was going to say, and he had 600 yards as a rookie. That's not terrible.
Right, Jalen Tolbert might have 6 yards as a rookie.
Jalen Tolbert may not have 600 yards in his career, including the CFL. Anyways, like my stance on Tony Pollard has always been, I don't care because Ezekiel Elliott's there and they're going to play Ezekiel Elliott. Your stance on Tony Pollard is that he's awesome and someday something will happen and Tony Pollard will get to play. And sure, Zeke got hurt. He missed the game. And Tony Pollard was a top 5 running back in the world. Was he number 1?
No, because it was such a high-scoring running back week. Like most weeks.
No excuses. Was he number 1?
No, I said he would be top 5, and he was.
Was he top 5?
He was the RB4. Yeah.
The RB4? The guy's not even RB top 3. He's not even the equivalent of Chase Claypool at the running back position. This is insane.
Yeah. So Pollard came in. He honestly pretty crazy. Like I think about half the weeks this year, 33 points would have gotten you RB1. But insanely, this was the week where Kamara goes for a 40 burger. McCaffrey goes, I think, for nearly 40. Henry goes berserk. So they all take down the 1, 2, 3. Pollard comes in RB4, and Deontay Foreman actually rounds up the top 5 this week.
Of course he does. Adding legitimacy to Tony Pollard's top 4 season or week.
It's important to note Tony Pollard, in 100% of his career starts, has gone for at least 30 fantasy points. The reason why it's important to note that is that Tony Pollard was drafted in 2019. Since that time, which is now he's in his 4th season, how many games has Tony Pollard been the starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys? 2, right? And how many games has Ezekiel Elliott been the starting running back for the Dallas Cowboys at that point?
I don't know, 4 seasons, you say? What's 4 times 16?
Well, this is 3.5 seasons. Anyway, it's 55 times, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So how many times out of the 2 that Tony Pollard has been the starting running back has he had 30 fantasy points?
I believe it's 2.
Yeah, he's 2 for 2, right? How many times out of the other 55 games has Ezekiel Elliott had 30 fantasy points?
I would venture to guess it's 0.
It's actually 1. He did it once.
Is that because Tony Pollard missed the game?
No, I think that was like in like 2019 when Pollard like didn't play.
Oh, yeah, naturally.
Since Pollard has like been a part of the offense, Ezekiel Elliott does not come anywhere near 30 fantasy points.
Where it's unfair is that Tony Pollard probably has never missed a game, so Ezekiel Elliott has never had the backfield to himself. Whereas Ezekiel Elliott has missed 2 games.
Well, he did have it for like 2 entire years when Pollard like didn't play until eventually they were like, oh, like let's like play Pollard a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then now unfortunately they've reached the max. Jerry Jones. What an individual! Like
beauty.
It's honestly, it's like almost impressive when you get to the point where you're just like, I have so much money that I can be as idiotic and like self-harming as I want to be, and you can't do anything about it. And like he just seems to get so much joy out of just standing up there and just owning the libs by just being like, "We go, Zeke goes, baby." Like it's honestly comical. I'm actually torn. Okay, so let's talk about. we'll talk about Pollard as like a dynasty asset in a second. Okay. I just want to talk about Tony Pollard as like a football player, right?
Yeah.
So
he's one of those.
So my takes on like Pollard has like always been split in two. Like the big thing, like I care about football, like I like football, right? And I like running backs, like that's just my favorite position to evaluate and talk about. And like my first take really was just like, honestly, actually, it's kind of evolved over the years. Like my first take was like, oh, Pollard is potentially kind of a fun player coming out of Memphis, like just a unique profile. I didn't really think he was much of a running back. Then Ezekiel Elliot like started showing signs of decline. Then my take was just like, oh, I think Zeke is like probably kind of bad. And then Pollard in like a small sample might be kind of good. And then last year, like really my take was less like Pollard is like coming into last year. My take was less like Pollard is like literally one of the best running backs in the NFL. It's more like Pollard seems to be a pretty good running back, at least in some sort of role. And Zeke seems to be a pretty bad running back. And so I would not spend a first round pick on Zeke. And then last year, over like as Pollard's role expanded, they gave him more touches. It was like, oh no, like Pollard is like good. And Zeke is like bad. Tony Pollard is in a class with only like Aaron Jones, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb in terms of where he's ranking in terms of rush yards over expected every year. It's one of those smell test stats where it's like if all of the other guys around him are that good, that's usually a good sign. I am not. So there's a lot of people in like the running back film community, not all of them, but certainly a sect of the running back film community that has always been down on Pollard, that always thinks it's impossible that he could carry a load. And to some extent, that just might be a self-fulfilling prophecy, where it's like if there's enough people that think he can't carry a load, then they'll never give him a load, and then it'll like end in this endless feedback loop that never gets a chance to actually falsify itself. I'm not going to say that he 100% can carry a load over a full season. I don't know. All I'm going to say is like the absence of evidence to the contrary is not absence that thesis is actually correct. What I will say is that every time he's ever gotten the ball, he does really good things with it. And so what I would do as an organization is just like try and give him the ball more and then see, right? Like let's assume that there is a point of diminishing returns, at which point Tony Pollard is no longer like a particularly value-added back. I guess I would just try and reach it, right? Like I would just see, right? This is like, I don't know. I would just try and see, like, let's chug a little more. Let's do a little more. Let's do a little more. And then you find out. The thing is, Pollard's 6 feet, 212 pounds. Like, he's a little skinny for a feature back, for sure. But it's not like we're talking about, like, he's like 5'10", 180, right? Like, it's not something, like, absolutely unconscionable that a 6 foot, 212 pound running back could just be a lead running back. And he's a really dynamic playmaker out in space as well. He played slot wide receiver in college. He's typically been a high targets per route run guy. He just hasn't been a high routes run guy in Dallas because they usually use a lot of running backs and pass protection in their scheme. He's not very good at pass protection. He gets this opportunity, and I mean, he was remarkable in this game. He's breaking big plays all the time. This is now his third run. I believe it was his third touchdown run of like over 50 yards this year, where he gets this ball going to the outside. He's breaking tackles. He's sidestepping people. He's juking people in the open field. And his breakaway speed is unreal. I mean, I think probably Travis Etienne is the only running back right now in the NFL that I think can match him in terms of like a breakaway speed contest. The biggest thing that angers me and why I almost like don't even find it funny that Zeke or that Jerry Jones is so dumb. It's like running backs' careers just aren't very long. Like, I think Pollard is a pretty special player. It like deeply saddens me that he's wasted 4 years with this organization that has just chosen to completely waste his talents because they paid a very mediocre running back a ton of money. I don't know if he'll necessarily ever get a chance to lead a backfield because I think that it's fair that NFL teams would have questions of whether or not he can lead a backfield. I think he's shown enough in his opportunities now, and he's like joined enough of the mainstream where he's not just like some fantasy cult hero like people talk about him in NFL circles, where it would really surprise me if he doesn't get at least a decent contract and a chance to contribute as like a co-leader of a backfield next year. I pray that Dallas does not keep him, or at the very least, I pray that Dallas does not keep him with Zeke. If they decide like, oh, we're getting rid of Zeke and we're making Tony Pollard the feature back, that would be awesome. I don't think that's going to happen just because I think if that was their plan, then I think you would just try it now, right? Like, to me, it's like, to me, if that was in my consideration set, if I was like, I'm not sure what we should do next year with Pollard, I would just play him as the starter for like a couple games and then find out if I want to pay this guy or not. They have not taken that approach, so I don't think that they're going to re-sign him. or if they do re-sign him, it'll be to a complementary role. I hope he goes somewhere to an outside zone scheme where they can give him like 12 to 15 carries per game and 3 to 4 targets. And I personally hope that it's the Eagles so that he can beat the Cowboys 2 times per year and stomp on the star and make Jerry Jones eat shit twice a year for the next few years. But the biggest thing that saddens me is that I think that, like, even if everything breaks perfectly for Pollard and he has this year that's incredible next year, he'll then be like 27 the next year, and he'll probably not have the same type of breakaway speed and athleticism that makes him such a special player. And I guess most of all, I just hope that he gets a decent enough contract that he's able to like use this rare athletic talent that he has to benefit himself and his family. But it just really makes me sad that he's like never going to get the opportunity to fully show what he can do because of like some rich white dude who doesn't understand what's good for his football team.
All right. Yeah, no, like you've basically summed up my entire argument in the like many years that we've been arguing about Tony Pollard, and that Tony Pollard is never going to get a chance, and therefore rostering him is a useless waste of time because you get to use him like once a year. Yay.
So I think that's like where I disagree in the sense, like I don't think that necessarily he's going to get a chance. I mean, he might. I hope that he does.
He's going to get a chance to do something at some point, but he's going to be 27 by that time. And
like 26. He'll be 26 next year.
All right, fine. Is he a free agent after this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a UFA. I mean, who knows with the Cowboys? They could fucking franchise tag him for all I know. I mean, I'll just be the field position. Could you imagine if they kept Zeke and then spent like a $9 million franchise tag on Pollard?
It's the right thing to do. You got to run the ball to win. I saw Jerry Jones saying something about like Zeke finishes runs.
Yeah.
And that's why he's more better.
Yeah.
Than Tony Pollard. And I think that's really wonderful because, you know, if you can get into a position where you're, you know, in 2nd and 6 because Zeke finished the run versus getting, 6 points from Tony Pollard by running 50 yards for a touchdown, it's the right thing to do. Because if you score a touchdown from 50 yards away, do you know what you're not doing? You're not controlling the clock. And the number one goal of the offense is to control the clock. And that's why you need to get 4 yards at a time. So you can run many, 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 many plays and then potentially kick a field goal.
You gotta establish
better way to do it.
You have to control you have to dictate terms. You have to control the line of scrimmage.
That's right.
You have to do all of this stuff.
The things you need to do.
There's like this. I'm going to break this into both a Pollard take and this also applies to Travis Etienne. I think that they're kind of similar, although I actually think that Pollard is like better. I think that he has less deficiencies than Etienne, although I love Etienne and he actually will have a chance to lead a backfield. He already had a chance, which is the power of draft capital. There's like a sect of the running back film community that irks me tremendously. And I say this because I grind running back film. Like the people in the Bulletproof Patreon know that like when I'm posting these weekly thoughts, I'm often including clips of running back runs. Like I'm describing why I like certain players. Like a lot of my takes on running backs come from film. Like my Khalil Herbert take this year was very much a film take. I was like, I'm watching this guy run. I think he's a perfect fit for this new scheme. He's going to be more efficient in this outside zone scheme that Getsy's going to be running than Montgomery is. Like I think that running back is to some extent a film position, and I think that it has value. So I'm not like diminishing the idea of judging running backs through film. What I am diminishing is that I think there's a section of the running back film community that judges running backs on an athleticism curve. Like I think that there is a large prevailing thought that if we accept that like speed, burst, and athletic ability are dominant components of running back skill, that it like makes people's ability to judge film and understand scheme less important. And there's like a reactionary backlash to that causes people to overhype and overpraise technically sound, physically limited running backs, and then find ways to nitpick these special athletic explosive running backs that might have certain skill sets deficiencies that cost them a couple of yards on certain plays. And I'll just name them. Matt Waldman put out this thread on Pollard, and he was breaking down pretty much each of his runs. And
shots fired on the Bulletproof.
Yeah, firing shots. At Matt
Bullets podcast. Bullets are flying.
You know what? Hashtag not sorry, Matt. Hashtag not sorry, Matt. Matt Waldman puts up this tweet thread, and he's showing each of these Pollard runs, and he's saying. He's basically saying like, good game by Pollard, but he's doing this. Top end speed doesn't matter that much. He showed a couple plays, whatever, well blocked plays. I mean, the Cowboys O line crushed. Like a lot of the plays that Pollard had were legitimately well blocked. I'm not going to take that away. But then he gets to the end and he posts these two. And the first one, and this is like the condensation of everything that's wrong with this section of running back film analysis. First one, he says, this is what Zeke gives you that Pollard can't. And he shows Pollard running stretch play that's not particularly well blocked. He gets met about 1 yard after the line of scrimmage, and he does not get low enough. He's pretty upright. The guy tackles him at about shoulder height, and he goes down. Doesn't get any extra yardage. Not a great rep. Ultimately, what was he going to do? Was he ever going to break that tackle? No, there was no room. If he had a lower center of gravity, if he was a little stronger, could he have made that a 3 yard gain instead of a 1 yard gain? Yeah, probably. Probably Zeke makes that a 3 yard gain instead of a 1 yard gain. Okay, that's what Zeke gives you that Pollard can't. The next tweet, it says, this is what Pollard gives you that Zeke can't. And that is his 54-yard touchdown run, in which he takes another stretch play, out stretching towards the sideline, makes a great cut at the line of scrimmage. Matt Wellman says that Zeke would also make that same change of direction cut. Maybe. Would he be able to make it quick enough to get away from the D-line? I'm not particularly sure, but let's say that maybe he does. And then he says, okay, well, what Pollard would then be able to get around the corner. He says Zeke still gets around the edge. I'm not so sure Zeke still gets around the edge. I think he moves well vertically. I don't think he moves well laterally any longer. Let's even say that's true. What he says the difference is that Pollard is then able to outrun the safety and house it for a touchdown instead of getting tackled at the 30-yard line, which is definitely true. And then he's like, so there's some stuff that, Zeke can give you. There's stuff that Pollard can give you. But, the stuff Pollard can give you is 1 or 2 plays a game. This is why these people are bad at fantasy football, right? Like, because they don't even understand. Like, we wanted to name this show Chasing Tails at one point, because it's like the tail outcomes, the important outcomes matter. Pollard being able to turn what would be a 10-yard run into a touchdown matters a lot more than Zeke turning 1 yard gains into 3 yard gains. It doesn't really matter. It matters in a certain circumstance. It matters maybe at the goal line, right? Turning 1 yard into 3 yards, that matters.
That matters.
But at the 50-yard line on a 1st and 10, doesn't really particularly matter, right? So like, if you want to use Zeke as like a specialty goal line back, by all means. But and the other thing that's so funny, Jay Moyer puts out a tweet. He says, oh, the issue with Zeke versus Pollard is that with Zeke, you can use your whole playbook, right? You can use your whole playbook. Mostly, they always talk about, Zeke's runs are deflated because they use them on all these inside zone runs. Okay, first of all, are we sure Tony Pollard couldn't be successful on inside zone runs? I'm not particularly sure, because it seems like he's successful on all the runs that he has by the numbers. Maybe he wouldn't be. I don't know. I'm not going to say that it's impossible that he wouldn't be. Also, if there's a type of run that is so predictably inefficient that it causes any running back who runs them to be predictably inefficient, what if we ran less of them? Like, why? Why are we having this take? Like, it's like madness to me. It's like, well, you just can't not run the ball up the middle repeatedly for 3 yards at a cloud of dust. And so if you're just giving all these running back, he's going to be pretty inefficient. It's like, maybe we should run less of these inefficient plays. Like, because the Cowboys, basically they were like, the Cowboys had to run a really restricted offense. Well, they scored 49 points. So it seemed like whatever restrictions they made, like maybe the eradication of all of the unexplosive, inefficient plays from your offense is actually a good thing. And it relates to ETN too. Like, ETN makes mistakes. Like, I think he's a way more mistake-prone runner than Tony Pollard. Like, he does bad things. He's not as decisive. He doesn't have as good a vision. I think he'll work on that. He's a rookie, essentially. Tony Pollard is now in year 4. But it's the same thing where people are like, James Robinson's so much better than Travis Etienne. James Robinson's so much better. No, he's not, right? He's not better, because ultimately, when Travis Etienne gets a hole, he's taking it for 40, 50 yards. Like, this guy has now already tied the NFL record 30+ yard runs in his first 3 career starts, because he's an extremely fast dude who's the most athletic person on the field. And that's ultimately just more important than getting small, minor wins and executing the scheme to perfection. That's why the people that thought Carter was better than Etienne are wrong. That's why the people who thought that Michael Carter was going to hold off Breece Hall this year because he has better vision between the tackles are so lost in the sauce of trying to defend their own project that they're just wrong. And so there's this. People were saying, actually the film people weren't wrong on Etienne, right? People were trying to dunk on the film people about Etienne. And some people were trying to, in defense, saying, no, they weren't wrong about Etienne. They were right about how he should be deployed, and they were right about this. And to that extent, it's true, right? I think that they were right about identifying what he can do and what he can't do. What they were very wrong about was assessing how much what he can do matters versus how much what he can't do matters. Because ultimately, if you were correct about identifying his skill sets, but you were unable to convert that into actionable advice, and instead you convert that into advice that says Michael Carter and Trey Sermon are better than Travis Etienne, then you are wrong. You are just wrong about the position. You're wrong about fantasy football. You're wrong about what NFL teams value, because the whole idea of being, well, I'm not a fantasy analyst, I'm a running back analyst. NFL teams decided to draft Travis Etienne in the first round, and they decided to make him a workhorse halfway through his first full season. NFL teams drafted Breece Hall in the second round. They decided to make him a workhorse immediately. These running backs are providing more value because explosive plays matter.
So you're 100% right. I love everything you said. I just really want to go back to what Jerry Jones had said, because I think it's just really insightful, and we should probably break it down in detail because of like how much people will learn from this quote, which I've pulled up for us to have a quick look at. And here's how it goes. So here, I'll set it up. This is what the article says. Despite that, Jones told reporters on Sunday that Elliott is in zero danger of losing his starting job, which rightfully so, because of these reasons. There is no argument, Jones says. Zeke's ability to punish, Zeke's ability to deliver, Zeke's ability, and then he just loses that ability, just Zeke's ability. What he does for us in pass protection. And frankly, Zeke's ability to make big plays are there. And we're going to go where Zeke goes. He's that integral to our success. And I think he's absolutely right, because there's one thing that we know about Zeke Elliott. It's synonymous. Like Zeke Elliott, big plays, they go together. And we know this because there's a website, you maybe never heard of it, you probably haven't, at playerpoker.com. They have wonderful metrics in which they track these kinds of things like big plays. And if you look at Ezekiel Elliott dating back to 2020, this is the last 3 years, dating back to 2020, you can see his breakaway run rate. His breakaway run rate is percentage of carries that go 15 yards or greater. You can see that he has a 1.6% breakaway run rate. And that is the type of big plays that make the Cowboys offense thrive. In 2021, though, it got better because Zeke is that good. He had 2.5%. That was good enough for running back 45 in the world. We're talking about the entire world. We're not talking about the NFL, the world. He's in the top 45 players out of 8 billion people on the planet. How many people are on the planet? Now, was it 8? 9? I don't even know.
A lot of people.
I've lost count. How many people? You must know.
A lot of people.
A lot of people. And Zeke's number 45.
Yeah.
That's like in the 0.000000001 percentile. Do the stuff. Then 2022 rolls around. This is what he's most recently working with.
Yeah.
Ezekiel Elliott out here just making the world embarrassed with a 1.8% breakaway run rate. Number 51 in the world. Again, in the like fractions of a percentile. Best player in the world.
Do you know what Pollard's breakaway run rate is this year?
Why don't you let me know?
It's 11%.
You should ask if Jerry Jones subscribes to playerprofile.com. He doesn't even have to. It's free. This is free on the internet. You don't even have to subscribe, Jerry.
11% versus no, like yeah, if he did get all the runs that Zeke got, it wouldn't be 11%, but it'd definitely be higher than 2.
It's probably not in the 50s of NFL running backs. By the way, there are 32 running backs that start in the NFL. So Ezekiel Elliott is running for a breakaway run rate lesser than like half the league's backup running backs. Now, I think that a lot of times people get what I say a little bit conflated with what I mean. And what I say is that Tony Pollard is not a player that you want on your fantasy team because he's not going to score a lot of fantasy points because he plays behind Ezekiel Elliott. That doesn't mean that I think Ezekiel Elliott's the best running back in football. It means he's not going to get less touches than Tony Pollard because Jerry Jones says things like we go as Zeke goes. And I'm just not willing to bet on Jerry Jones changing his mind, despite all of the evidence in the world. It doesn't matter, and that's why we don't want Tony Pollard on our fantasy teams. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry.
My point for Pollard and why I think he has been a good fantasy option. I mean, he has been because he's continually held or increased value. I think ultimately, like I've always said that he's like a second round pick that you can put in your lineup on occasion. Like he's going to hold value because everybody's counting down until 2023 because everybody knows that he's good. Everybody's been counting down till this free agency. And so you just hold him and hold him and hold him. And then if you want to sell before he hits free agency, just sell at that point. And in the meantime, you have the opportunity to score 30 points anytime that Zeke twists an ankle.
Which is like twice in his career. Ezekiel Elliott has missed.
Right, but he could break his leg tomorrow. Maybe I'm going to hit him with a crowbar. I don't know.
Perhaps that could happen. Tony Pollard's mom should hit him with a crowbar. That's what should happen.
You know what's honestly wild? Like, good for Tony Pollard. Like, there's so many disgruntled players in the NFL.
Anything. He's got it.
It's remarkable. Like, Pollard is like always like so complimentary of Zeke and everything. Like, if I were Pollard, like he must be a significantly nicer person than I am. If I were Pollard, I would lose my mind.
This is non-alpha behavior. This is why he doesn't have the big target share.
That's a good point.
He needs to be a diva.
He needs to be more like Elijah Moore.
If he wants to eat, he's got to get on Twitter and call out the world. I don't know why I'm not getting the ball. I don't know what my chemistry is like with Dak Prescott. Could never get the ball. If I knew, you'd know. And I'd be the best running back in football. And he's going to say that. And he's not.
Well, that was a good Tony Pollard conversation. I'm glad that we've agreed to something. I'm glad that we've at least agreed on the basis that Tony Pollard's actually good. That's the main project of my life is I've finally gotten people to capitulate on that point.
I don't think that there's any argument that he isn't good at football. I don't think you can't point to anything and say this player isn't doing well in the NFL. There's no metric out there that says he's not good. The metric out there that says he's not good for fantasy is that Ezekiel Elliot exists and Jerry Jones will never let that happen. So
at least Pollard is outscoring him this year in fantasy points, and that's just a small victory that ultimately doesn't matter much for your fantasy teams, but it makes me happy. So
I have one other rant on this that just drives me nuts because people tell me that these players, these Tony Pollards and the AJ Dillons of the world, have standalone value.
I mean, Pollard does. He is an RB2.
He does not. He was scoring 10 points a game until Ezekiel Elliott got hurt. If you were starting Tony Pollard in your lineup for the past 7 weeks, you were not happy. His season-long fantasy points got buoyed by this, he had an incredible, Deontay Foreman-esque week this week. Thank God, because it saved his whole season. AJ Dillon, if you look at AJ Dillon's standalone value last year when he's RB20, it came because Aaron Jones got hurt. And when Aaron Jones got hurt, AJ Dillon's production presumably went up because we know that's what happens with running backs. And if you were starting AJ Dillon in all the games that Aaron Jones was not hurt, you were not very happy because his running back, his points were so bad in those games that even when Aaron Jones got hurt and AJ Dillon got to pump up the volume on the touches, I don't know, wagon, I don't know what to call it. He got to get some freaking touches, and then he finally scored points. And yeah, that was a great start in the week that Aaron Jones was there, but he did not have standalone value. You sucked if you started AJ Dillon when Aaron Jones was playing football. I'm sorry. Same thing with Tony Pollard. He scored 10 points a game. That's not standalone value. That is
standalone value. I mean, it's
in a redraft league, you can get 10 points a game off the waiver wire almost every single week.
Right, but you can't. Yes, but it's the combination of standalone value and contingent value. I think Pollard is a better pick in best ball for that reason than in a managed league where it's you're kind of just you're setting and forgetting and you don't have access to all these different waiver wire running backs that may or may not because you're not drafting Deontay Foreman in a best ball league realistically, right? So you don't have that opportunity to pick up Deontay Foreman on waivers, put him in.
Why wouldn't you draft Deontay Foreman, the number 4 running back in week 8? That was a
number 5 running back in week 8. Number 5.
Oh, he's number 5. Yeah, Tony Pollard beat him. That's right. My mistake. Sorry, everyone.